Welcome to another terrifying tale from Nightmare Alley. We want to provide content like this for a long time to come, and your support will help make that happen. Now sit back and brace yourself for another spine-tingling tale.
Doom Bunny, Quarantine Nights Part 1. One night a mighty gulf was bridged, and the dream-haunted skies swelled down to the lonely watcher's window to merge with the close air of his room, and make him a part of their fabulous wonder. H.P. Lovecraft. Bellingham was getting really creepy under quarantine. The Bay Town was always a little weird, but something about the COVID quarantine took it to the next level. Shops and restaurants were closed. The streets were devoid of the usual college-aged dipshits and microbrew connoisseurs that usually plague the streets nearly every night of the week. It was practically a ghost town during the day, but come night, things were odd, like the Matrix was broken odd. I had been driving Uber for a couple years and had grown very educated in what people actually meant by belling weird. It wasn't just the meth and the fentanyl or the mentally ill homeless that lived on the outskirts of everyone's peripheral vision. It wasn't the cornrow-wearing stoner townies or the corner drunks panhandling in front of the Horseshoe Cafe. I mean, yeah, it was those things, but there was something else. Like the homeless and beat cops were arming for a war that normal people had no idea was brewing. Anyone who'd paid attention long enough could tell the homeless weren't just harmless panhandlers down on their luck. Some of them, anyway. They weren't all merely bipolar junkies bumming bus fare by day and shooting up at night. Some of them, a growing number of them, were operating with intention and increasing urgency. That feeling didn't cease when the town went on lockdown. If anything, it seemed to elevate the foreboding feeling. The near-empty streets were thick with it, static-charged. I could feel the intensity grow. It was palpable. It felt, at the same time, like a physical weight thickening the air I was breathing. It felt like my nerves were slowly being pulled to an inevitable breaking point. Frayed didn't even begin to describe how my nerves felt. Every night I parked down by a Holly and Railroad waiting for the Uber app to ping in my ear to alert me that I had a passenger to pick up. Usually it was just to take someone home after grocery shopping or to give some stoner a ride to and from a weed dispensary. Most people on the streets wore masks and kept their distance, but the homeless, or at least a subset of them, had begun wearing masks months before anyone ever heard of COVID-19. They had started arming themselves with staves and clubs about the same time, maybe a little earlier. Some of them beat on impromptu drums, garbage cans mostly. Somehow they all drummed to the same beat, a primordial beat that didn't help my frayed nerves at all. The world was going to hell and I was sure I was losing my mind. I was barely making money to pay the bills before the pandemic. Once the lockdown hit, not only did the Uber customers drop way off, but I was risking my life picking up total strangers, just so I could scrape up enough to pay a phone bill and put some gas in my shitty Toyota Sienna. Once I gassed up at the end of the night, I'd maybe grab a 99-cent can of chili from the local loser store known as the Gross Out. That's not the world I thought we were going to live in when I graduated school 30 years earlier and the Soviet Union was collapsing. Yay for super capitalism. Anyway, the only people out at night under the quarantine were homeless people and rando townies who couldn't bother to wear their masks to the weed stores. Cops were sparse. Strange considering how much they overpopulated the streets when everything was normal. One night things were really slow. I was sipping a Coke in my minivan, not giving a single shit that I was pre-diabetic, when I heard a rap on the passenger side door. I'd have recognized that heavily tattooed torso anywhere. I didn't know the guy's name, but I had seen him a few summers earlier. The town had been a total smoke show that summer thanks to all the surrounding wildfires. I was parked back behind the abandoned Pacific Market, trying not to get violently ill from the smoke I was ingesting, when a fight broke out in a makeshift meth head camp. The meth must have been especially potent that summer. The homeless were in fine form all over town. Super aggressive and wild-eyed. They were a bunch of yammering idiots who had no issue walking right out into traffic and mad-dogging drivers who had the gall to brake for them. I called 911 to report the fight when the shirtless guy strolled out of the smoke and up to the makeshift parking lot camp. The only piece of clothing he wore was a pair of tattered, dark denim jeans. His upper body was covered in symbols. I had no idea what the symbols meant, but they were not normal tattoos, more like evenly sized stamps riddling his torso, neck, and arms. The smoke was so thick I couldn't make out his face. He just came out of the nasty, caustic shit like a shirtless Batman and pulled the homeless dudes apart. One of them tried to go after him, but the shirtless guy knocked him out with the hardest, most casual punch I've ever watched anyone throw. I couldn't hear anything inside my Sienna, except for the sickly wet impact of that punch as it connected with the froggy guy's face. Shirtless guy gestured to the other homeless dude before he slipped back into the smog, walking in the general direction of Cornwall Street. Panic-eyed, the last homeless guy standing gathered up a few belongings and skittered away in a manner that only a meth head could skitter. I waited for the cops to show. I left a statement with a surprisingly young and attractive policeman named Officer Carter. She took my statement, warned me to stay away from shirtless guy, and then moved to inspect the meth camp. She had asked me to describe the tattoos, but the guy had been too far away for me to really identify anything. The officer looked annoyed by that. Abnormally so. I had no idea what that was about and didn't care. I never wanted to see those intense green eyes again. I drove off as soon as she started heading to the camp in the general direction of the unconscious guy still laying in the parking lot. I mean, I had seen a couple tattoos that had seared into my mind, but I had no idea how to describe them. I hadn't seen shirtless guy again until he knocked on my car door. Not really wanting to do anything but drive off, I slipped my totally not N95 mask on and cracked the window. He wasn't bending down, so I had no idea what he looked like. All I could see were the strange symbols littering his body. "Yeah?" I asked.
"I need a ride to the Coachman Inn,"
he said in a deep, muffled voice. Man, he freaked me out. He must have spotted the Uber decal I left sitting on my dashboard. I was too stubborn to stick it to the window like city ordinance required. "Can you hail me on the app?"
"I don't use a phone,"
he said, as matter of fact as if he said he doesn't have a VCR. "Do you have cash?" I asked against my better judgment. I really needed some cash, but holy shit did I not want to give this guy a ride.
"Yeah,"
he replied in that strange muffled voice. I let out a deep breath of nervous air. "Okay, hop in the back seat," I said, unlocking the door for him. I started the engine and reflexively checked my mirror for oncoming traffic as I heard the side door slide open. I needn't have bothered. The streets were barren and oddly beautiful as twilight turned to night and the streetlights lit up the wide strip of hollies for as far as the eye could see. As he slid the door shut, I took a hard look at him in the rearview mirror. I instantly regretted letting him into my shitty minivan. He was definitely the guy I saw a few summers earlier. Maybe he had a few more tattoos. Maybe he had packed on a few more pounds of muscle across his shoulders and chest. But the matte black bunny helmet was new. Yeah, bunny helmet. Let me try to capture the essence of this. This helmet was not one of those fun and sassy motorcycle helmets you can find on Amazon for your Asian girlfriend. This thing was industrial and handcrafted. It was a clumsy patchwork of welded-together bits that were fabricated by someone who never took entry-level metalworking. It looked like it at one time had been an antique deep-sea diver's helmet by the way the neck of it came down over his shoulders and how big and thick the helmet was. The original viewports in the front and side had been cut away. In the front, large vertical slots had been cut out and fine mesh had been clumsily welded over them. The same mesh was used to cover the side viewports as well. No wonder his voice was so muted. There was no mouth hole, just the vents where the viewports once were. What truly put it all over the top was the crudely fabricated bunny ears mounted onto the top of the helmet. Everything was sloppily spray-painted in a matte black paint. It looked like white chalk had recently been used to draw in a cartoonish mouth with big chunky teeth, but had been smudged almost beyond recognition. Shirtless guy was no craftsman. What he was tall and massively muscled, so he had to slouch down low in the chair to clear the minivan ceiling, his head cocked at a comical angle so the bunny ears wouldn't bang on the roof of the vehicle. I'm a thoughtful guy, so I opened the sunroof for him and told him he could drop the seat back if he wanted to.
"Thank you,"
he said, immediately adjusting the seat to angle his bunny ears out the sunroof while he fished in his front pocket. He slid a battered $10 bill into my hands. I tossed it into the glove box beside my Lysol spray for later deconning as I pulled out onto Holly and crossed a few lanes to make the next left turn. At the intersection, I could hear a primal beat being drummed out on what I imagined was an upside-down bucket. It just kinda had that sound to it. The street was otherwise deserted, and I didn't feel like peering into the darkened stoops of shops to figure out which transient was killing time with that unnerving beat. "We're going to the Coachman?" I reflexively asked, confirming the drop-off. I was trying to shake off the sound of that drumming and focus on my passenger, but that beat had a way of getting into my head.
"Yeah,"
he replied. I couldn't be certain, but I felt as if he was studying my reflection in the rearview mirror, like he was sizing me up. So there we were in my minivan, him studying his masked Uber driver, me studying the tattooed shirtless guy in a giant bunny helmet.
"Can I have you wait for me?"
he continued.
"I'll only be there for 15 minutes. I need to be at Old School in an hour."
The tattoo parlor had only been a half block away from where I picked the guy up. "Okay, that'll be another $10. I'll need to get paid when we get to the Coachman." He retrieved a couple crumpled fives and handed them to me. They went right where I'd put his other bill. I really wanted to grab a Lysol wipe, but didn't want to offend the guy. "You sure do have a lot of tattoos," I said, knowing how dumb it sounded before I even said it. I could feel him staring at me like I was an asshole. "Sorry, I'm sure you hear that a lot." I tried to recover. "I just think they're cool. What do they represent?" The tension in the air eased. Without looking down, not that he would have been able to, he pointed to a fist-sized symbol over his heart.
"This is a ward. They're all wards, or sigils. This one in particular enhances both my physical and magical strength."
My interest genuinely perked. I was an old-school RPGer and avid horror fiction fan. I knew what wards were. I kicked myself for not noticing the symbols for what they obviously were earlier. "Like magical wards?" I asked, scanning his torso in the mirror to see if I recognized any. Most were about the same fist-sized symbols. Nearly all of them were encircled. I saw a pentacle and several symbols that represented the fire element. I didn't know what all the permutations were or why some of them were in boxes instead of circles.
"Yeah, like magic,"
he said.
"This one's an advanced protection ward,"
he continued, pointing to something that to me looked like a Celtic symbol, kind of like a knot, but also not like that.
"This one allows me to heal faster when injured. This symbol makes me more emotionally stable and wards off insanity. I should probably get it touched up."
"Damn," I said, genuinely interested. I mean, the guy was clearly a nut, and I was probably going to get murdered, but my curiosity got the better of me. "What's the one with the crossed-out eye?" The eye looked a little bit like the one found on the dollar bill, but a bold X was inked over it.
"Invisibility ward. It keeps me unseen from certain things and types of people,"
he answered. He obviously didn't want to talk about it. "What's the X with the horizontal line through it?" I asked.
"Helps me lose weight,"
he said, as I turned into one of the many crack hotels Bellingham had to offer. The ward must have worked. The guy didn't have a single ounce of fat on him.
"Stay right and go around back,"
he continued. I followed his instructions until he told me to stop at the very back of the motel. Perfect place for a tweaker to hole up. He handed me another $10 as he stepped out of the vehicle.
"In case I take a little longer than expected, please don't leave me stranded."
I nodded as I accepted his money. Hey, what's the symbol on the inside of your wrist? I asked, not sure why it intrigued me so much. Is it a fire symbol? He paused. Maybe he was impressed that I knew a tiny bit about magical wards. Maybe he was just annoyed that I was delaying him. I couldn't tell what he was thinking behind that enormous bunny helmet.
Yeah, fire. But not just fire. It's also a level 3 child protection ward.
Really? That's really cool. Where did you get it? I kind of want one.
Everyone should want one, but you have to earn it.
The side door slid shut with a bang before I had a chance to say anything else. I started deconning my hands and steering wheel while he ascended a set of stairs. I watched him being led into room 218 as I slipped my earbuds in and flipped on an audiobook. I noted that he had a long, intricate tattoo that ran down his spine. I recognized it as a sigil representing the cosmos. I only learned it from some research I did when I used to dungeon master a group of role players a decade ago. I recalled something about lining the sigil up with one's chakras for a variety of spiritual beliefs. What a weird dude. What an absolutely bizarre situation to find myself in. The air felt electric. Everything felt strange and stretched to its breaking point. I had lost track of time. I was that deep in thought. I wasn't even sure what I was thinking about. Really, I was just mindlessly staring at the sick glow of a nearby streetlight as it flickered and threatened to burn out. A loud banging on the driver's side door snapped me out of it. I flinched when I realized shirtless guy was staring in at me. No one wanted to wake up to find that creepy bunny helmet looming over them.
It's time to go,
He said.
We need to move quickly.
We were back on the road as fast as I could shake my funk.
Are you okay?
He asked. He had been studying me from the back seat. Yeah, I'm fine, I replied. Sorry, I'm a little out of it.
You should get a ward to improve your energy and mental clarity.
I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, nodding my head. It wasn't a bad idea. I always wanted to dabble with some tattoos, but it would have to wait until I was making real money again. Old school, right? I finally replied.
Yeah, as fast as you can. I'm behind schedule.
You got it, I said, absently, accelerating as much as I reasonably could on an empty city street. What do you have going on tonight? Another tattoo?
You aren't an ape, are you?
The crazy shirtless man said. I had no idea how to reply.
You aren't primitive. You have some instincts, but the world that most people walk around in is merely a facade. That something different and darker is playing out just behind the curtain. You can feel that tingling all the way down in your cells, can't you?
I remained silent. What was I supposed to say? The guy had clearly smoked up back at the motel. I mean, I don't really know what you mean, I finally said, speeding up a little more. Suddenly, I really needed the ride to end. But yeah, I've read some obscure stuff and seen some things around town that I wouldn't describe as normal. My reply hung in the air, heavy, until I turned onto Holly and began to approach the tattoo parlor on the corner of Railroad.
Pull into the red zone in front of the shop. I'm just picking something up,
He said in that deep, muffled voice.
I'm gonna tell you something before I go inside. If you don't think I'm crazy, I want you to wait for me. I won't be more than a few minutes and I could use a ride to the lighthouse mission down the street.
I pulled into the red zone in front of a fire hydrant. My breath was growing strained with anxiety. Not about getting a ticket, but because I knew that my life was about to get a whole lot stranger and more complicated. Okay, what's up? I asked, unable to turn to look at shirtless guy. He studied me for a long time from behind the clunky metal bunny helmet. He could see my fear. He was probably having second thoughts about initiating me into his world.
Have you ever heard of Azathoth?
I glanced at the bunny helmet in the rearview mirror and reflexively pulled my mask aside to speak. The H.P. Lovecraft Elder God? The head inside the comically large helmet tried to nod.
Yes. The eldest of the eldest. The slumbering chaos. The blind idiot god. He who weaves the world with his dreams, the gnawing shadow, the Daemon Sultan, grandfather of the void and all things elder.
Shirtless guy was really pouring it on. Yeah, I've heard of him, I said, impatience tinging the tone of my voice as I snapped my mask back over my face.
You know that if he wakes, that reality will be destroyed? Even if he wakes for just a moment?
I used to run a Call of Cthulhu group. I knew the deal, and Shirtless Guy knew I knew. Yeah, even if a shard of him wakes, whatever that means, I replied. But doesn't he need cultists or something to awaken him? My stomach fell out my ass as realization set in. Wait, I said, snapping my agape jaw shut beneath my mask. The homeless guys with the staves and clubs, the drummers. My voice trailed off just as the faint sound of primal drums began to grow from up the street, back the way we had just come. Shirtless Guy leapt into action at the sound. He was out of the minivan and racing into Old School just as an amorphous black mass up the street slowly transformed into a pack of bicycles in my side view mirror. The drumming was growing louder as the pack slow rolled down the street. The streets were otherwise deserted. Shirtless Guy raced back out of the shop, holding a wooden baseball bat. He pulled open the door and stuck his absurdly large bunny helmet head into the van. I could see enough of the bat to tell it was covered in almost as many warts as Shirtless Guy. It stunk of soldering iron and burnt wood. It must have been getting modified while I was driving Shirtless Guy around town.
Listen,
he said in a deep, muffled voice.
Change of plans. I'll get to the mission on my own.
His voice was urgent. He wasn't scared. He was taking command. You sure? He cut me off and tossed a $100 bill at me. I stared dumbly at the money as a pack of cyclists began to whoosh by. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and hearing.
Yes, I'm certain. Don't follow me. Things are going to get strange and violent. You are not ready for it. I think I can handle this. But if I don't, if I fail...
I was listening, but my eyes were on the cyclists. They weren't normal cyclists. They were grungy weirdos. Meth heads in cornrows and filthy homeless people with jailhouse face tats. Many wore bandanas across their faces or masks with bizarre designs on them. Staves were strapped to their backs. Some held clubs. Several of them banged drums mounted onto the handlebars of their clearly stolen bicycles. But I knew they weren't merely transients. They were doomsday cultists. Servitors of Azathoth, the blind idiot god. They had come to Bellingham for only one reason: to awaken the slumbering chaos and destroy reality.
Well, if I fail, it's just empty void anyway. But if things get too weird, if things get too dark and wonky, you understand, get your ass inside of the Freemason Lodge on State Street.
The last of the pack was coming up on the minivan, banging out their drum beat.
You understand?
Shirtless Guy demanded. Yeah, I know where that lodge is. I'll go there. Shirtless Guy's body was twitching. I know it doesn't make any sense, but it seemed like it was about to boil or something. Or like he was a rocket about to take off. Sounds nuts. I could describe it a half a dozen different ways and it still wouldn't quite describe what I was seeing.
I gotta go. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for not being a blind ape.
With that, Shirtless Guy sprinted down the sidewalk. He was moving fast. Way too fast for a human, let alone a shoeless human. Blurry fast. He was easily catching up to the pack of cultists, on his bare feet. I could have sworn he lit up with a faint emerald nimbus and grew a little bleary as he disappeared into the night. Totally nuts. I turned off the engine and scooped up my earnings for the night. The cultists and Shirtless Guy were long gone down Holly Street, and I had no idea what to do besides try to process what I had just experienced over the previous hour. I could still hear the drum beat, but I wasn't sure if it was a mind worm or not. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see Shirtless Guy again, or if reality would even survive the night, so I slipped out of the minivan and into Old School. I slapped all my cash down on the counter as a squirrely tattoo artist blinked at me. "You was Doom Bunny?" the greasy-haired brunette asked. "Who?" I asked back, genuinely confused. "Guy you dropped off that just went running down the street. Doom Bunny," squirrely greasy guy stated. "Yeah, kinda," I began. "Look, I need some tattoos. Do you do protection wards?" Squirrely greasy guy shrugged. "I do all the wards, man. I created most of the ones Doom Bunny sports." He was snotty and I wanted to punch him, but I needed to be okay with him. "I got a book in the back you can flip through." "Cool," I said. "Let's start with the protection ward and see what else that stack of cash gets me afterwards." I left Old School 4 hours later. The night was as still as I had ever known a night to be in Bellingham. Not a soul was to be found. No drums. The electricity in the air was gone. My car was unticketed. I winced at the rawness of the protection ward etched onto the inside of my wrist. It wasn't a proper ink tattoo. I don't know what that guy used, but it was raw and it burned and it was going to scar. I was able to afford a second ward. This second one was slightly larger, dead center on my chest. Squirrely greasy guy helped me select it and recommended I go a little bigger with it under the circumstances. He had one himself and shared it with me. It was intricate, not like any symbol I had ever come across. He said it helped maintain mental clarity and ward off insanity. Doom Bunny had mentioned a ward like that earlier. I figured if I was going to be any help to him keeping Bellingham safe from the minions of Azathoth, protection from going insane would be apropos. I tossed the bottle of ointment Squirrely Greasy Guy gave me next to a can of mace I kept in one of the many minivan compartments. The fresh tattoo stung so badly I was certain I'd use up the entire bottle in no time. I turned on the engine and hung my mask over the rearview mirror. I considered turning on the Uber app and driving for a few more hours, but decided against it. I drove the silent street home, passing the red brick Freemason Lodge along the way. It was only a block from my house. I could literally see it from my bedroom patio that overlooked a sizable chunk of downtown in Bellingham Bay. If I had to get to the lodge in a hurry, it wasn't going to be a problem. Judging by the lack of drum beats and a general sense of calm in the air, I assumed I wouldn't need to worry about that for the night. Maybe I never would. But I was intent to find out why the lodges were safe from Azathoth, and how Doom Bunny came to be a champion of Bellingham. And where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmare. H.P. Lovecraft.
Thanks for listening. It's listeners like you that make what we do possible.